Hey friends, welcome to our 2-week piano sight reading challenge. Today is day 1. Thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited to have you here. I'd love to hear a little bit about you and what your experience is with sight reading. Go ahead and comment below this video so we know you're a part of our sight reading challenge community. Sight reading is important. The idea and the concept behind sight reading is that we can look at a piece of music and play it as well and as accurately as possible on the very first playthrough. It's a tricky thing to do for anyone because there are so many things going on a sheet of music that it's hard to internalize and reproduce all of them on the very first playthrough. But sight reading is really important to practice because it improves your reading skills. It improves your ability to interpret something musically, and it can increase your confidence at the piano. Sight reading is absolutely one of those things that if you practice it and you make it a part of your regular practice routine, you will absolutely see improvement. However, if you neglect sight reading and you're not really paying attention to sight reading, and you one day, spur of the moment, decide to pull out something really challenging and sight read it, it probably won't go very well. So sight reading works best when we can incorporate it into our daily practice. And you're already doing that by being here, so congratulations to you. We want to practice sight reading with pieces that are below our playing level. So the pieces that you're practicing in your everyday practice, or that maybe you're playing for your friends or performing, you're most likely not going to be able to sight read those, and that's okay. That's not necessarily the goal. We want to be able to start at a level that's lower than our playing level. In fact, often we go way lower than our current playing level, and we want to have success with those super simple exercises. Because if we can have a lot of success and slowly build up the level of our sight reading, that's how we make real progress. I practice sight reading quite often, but I'm at the point in my musical journey where I don't necessarily sit down and practice in a leveled way where I'm starting at a beginning level and go all the way through. However, there have been many times, most recently, I think it was about a year ago, actually, yeah, it was last year over the holiday break, I did take a level 1 book and I started in a level 1 sight reading book, and I literally went through every single book up through level 10. And even though I'm a professional musician, it was still really good for me to go back to those level 1s and to feel that success and to be able to fly through those examples. So regardless of your level, stick with me today and stick with me through this challenge. Even if you see the music that we're going to sight read and you think it's going to be way too easy, it's not a waste of time. I promise you will get something out of this. All right, so for this sight reading challenge, we're going to use the website sightreadingfactory.com, and I'll link that in the description below this video. And this website is awesome because it will automatically generate different examples for you to sight read from. And so during the videos, I'm going to put the example up in the video on the screen. So you don't need to go to the website right now, because the example that we're going to do in today's video, you're going to have on the video. So you can pause the video, you can rewind the video, you can take a screenshot, you can do whatever you need to do so that you can follow along with today's example. But then I'm going to give you some homework for tomorrow. And so for tomorrow, there won't be a video, but you're going to go to sightreadingfactory.com and you're going to generate your own examples to sight read and to practice tomorrow when there's not a video. So this is what sightreading.com looks like. And you can see that we can click on sight read. And then there is a bunch of different options, and we're going to go to piano. We're going to start at level 1, and we're going to pick a random time signature. We're going to pick the key of C major, which means that there's going to be no sharps or flats. We're going to start there, and we're going to do a free play. Now, you'll notice that I'm in demo mode, so I'm not logged into my account, which means that I only have a certain number of playthroughs each day. But like I said, this example is going to be on this video, so you don't need to worry about that so much for today. But in your practice tomorrow, if you go a little click happy with all of the settings, you might go through your plays too quickly. So just keep that in mind as you set up your practice for tomorrow. Now, today, and well, actually in all of the videos, but especially today, we're going to be focusing on the process of sight reading, because the most common mistake that people make when they go to sight read something is they just open up a book, they look at a piece of music, and they put their hands on the keys and they dive right in. And this can be fun, but it doesn't help us get to our goal, which is to play as well as possible on the first playthrough. We need to spend time before our hands are on the keys, looking at the piece, investigating, being a detective and seeing what's going on in this piece, so that when we put our hands on the keys, we are fully mentally prepared to play and we can play as well as possible. So first of all, let's just dive in and look at the music. And oftentimes when you're doing this on your own, like tomorrow when you're practicing, I recommend that you set a timer. Set a timer for 5 minutes and do not let yourself put your hands on the keys until those 5 minutes are up. Force yourself to continue to investigate this piece and look for patterns and analyze the piece until those 5 minutes are up, and then try to play through the piece. All right, so we're gonna start. So this piece is in 3/4 time. That means there's 3 beats in every single measure. We can see that the rhythm that we use in this piece is mostly quarter notes. There's a half note, and there's a couple of dotted half notes as well. We do need to have both hands playing in this example. You can see that there are notes written in the treble clef on the first line, and then there are notes written in the bass clef on the second line. Now they have been so kind as to put finger numbers here. So I've got a finger number 1 here on this middle C, and I also have a finger number 5 here on this bass C. Hear me talking about this piece, you can hear me going through and observing the time signature, the note values, the hand position. I'm gonna talk about the key signature. I'm gonna talk about accidentals, and any other musical terms or symbols that I see in the score. So I'm starting here with my thumb on middle C in the right hand, and if I look through this example, I can look through these notes and I can see that I'm not leaving that C 5-finger pattern, meaning that if my thumb is on C, I don't have a note that's higher than G. So I don't need to worry about my hand moving at all, at least my right hand in this example, which is great. In the left hand, I start with my pinky on C, on this bass C that's below middle C. And I am gonna scan through my notes, and I don't play above a G, so I also don't need to worry about my left hand moving around, which is really great. Both of my hands are gonna stay in that same exact hand position. Now the next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look through the pattern of notes, and I'm gonna see how they're moving. So am I moving by intervals of seconds or thirds or fourths or fifths? Or if you think of it as like steps or skips. If you don't know what intervals are, they're a really great, helpful way to recognize patterns in music. And I have a video that's all about intervals. So if you're not sure what intervals are, I would recommend that you go and check that out. You can do that right here. So we can see in the treble clef, where our right hand plays, I'm moving from this C up a step to D, back down a step to C, and then I do go up a skip or an interval of a third to the E, and then up a second to F, down a second to E, and then a skip or a third down to C. So there are 2 points in the music when I'm moving by more than a step, from this C to this E, and then from this E to this C. And that's important to note because whenever we're sight reading, if we're following a general pattern, so let's say my melody is mostly moving by steps, but occasionally there's a skip, those are spots that are likely to surprise us or to mess us up when we're sight reading. So we always want to pay attention to what the patterns are, but then also where the deviations from the patterns are or where things are slightly different, because those could potentially be error spots. Now, in the bass clef, I'm starting on C, I'm going up a step to D, I'm staying on D, I'm going up a step to E, up a step to F, down a step, staying on E, and then down a skip. Aha! So here's another skip in the bass clef between the very last 2 notes of the piece. So that's another point that could potentially be an error spot if we hadn't noticed that right now during this process. I want to look for other patterns with the overall structure of the piece. So are there any measures that repeat? Are there any lines that repeat? This is a short example, so we don't have a lot of lines or phrases to work with. But in this example, we do have some similarities between the top line and the bottom line. So let's see, our top line goes from a C to a D, and the same thing happens in the bottom line. So they start out exactly the same for the first 2 beats, but then they're different because on the top line we go back down to a C, whereas on the bottom line we stay on this D. Both lines have a dotted half note E in that second measure, and then both lines start the third measure with an F, although you can see that up here the F is a half note being held, and down here the F is just a quarter note. And then both lines also end on a C. Now, this is incredibly helpful to notice because, like I was saying before, we want to see the things that are the same, but we also want to see the things that are different. The way that our brains work is that we really like patterns. We like it when things are the same. And sometimes our brains will actually try to make things the same, even if they're not. So it's really important when we're sight reading to notice the slight differences, the things that are the same, and the big differences. Because oftentimes with those slight differences, our brain will try to make things the same between the 2 sections, and we can make mistakes in that way. Okay, so now that I have looked at the example, I've noticed a lot of the patterns, I've looked at the time signature. There's not other symbols in the music. There's no tempo marking, there's no other words, and there's no dynamics. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna focus on the rhythm, and I'm gonna clap and count the rhythm out loud so that I can internalize the feel of the rhythm before I try to produce any sound at the piano. Now with sight reading, we always wanna start slow, okay? We can always increase our speed if we decide to play it a second time, but it's really challenging to slow ourselves down if we start at a tempo that's too fast. And if we start at a tempo that's too fast, we will undoubtedly make a lot of mistakes, or a lot more mistakes than we wanted to. All right, so I'm gonna turn my metronome on to 60, and I'm gonna clap and count through this example so that I can internalize this rhythm. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so hopefully you were able to follow along with me, and if not, go ahead and rewind the video and do that a couple of times until you feel like that rhythm is really internalized and there's nothing about it that feels challenging anymore. All right, now the next thing that we're gonna do is we're going to turn our metronomes on again, and we're going to mock play this piece, meaning that we're either going to put our hands on a tabletop. You can put your hands on the piano, on the actual notes, but we're not going to make any sound. We're going to go through and we're going to follow along with the metronome and with the correct rhythm, and we're going to practice moving the fingers that are playing in the example without actually making any sound. And this is going to give us a chance not only to internalize the rhythm a little bit more, but to also focus on what fingers are playing what notes, to really actually physically internalize all of the patterns and the intervallic movements that we talked about and that we looked at before. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna put my hands on my piano and I'm going to mock play. I'm gonna move my fingers, but I'm not actually gonna press them down. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now that we've mock played it, we're gonna keep our metronome on and we're gonna try to play it and actually produce sound on the piano. Now, I'm gonna show you how to do this, and you're welcome to listen to mine and then try it on your own. But as you do this sight reading, I want you to make sure that if any mistakes happen, or if anything unexpected happens, that you continue on, okay? So try not to go back to the very beginning and start over, because this process of sight reading is all about trying to play something as well as possible on the first try. And so if we make a mistake and we go back to the beginning, we're really turning it into more of like a regular practice like we would do on one of our pieces. So we wanna make sure we continue on. So if you need to stop or you need to pause, that's fine, but take a breath and then keep going and try to make it through the example, playing each measure only once. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, so congratulations on completing day 1 of our 2-week piano sight reading challenge. Tomorrow, there's not going to be a video, but I do want you to use this website, sightreadingfactory.com, to generate your own piece at level 1, practice on your own. And I want you to go through this process. And if you need to rewind the video and follow along with all of the things that I went through, please do that. Because like I mentioned before, this process of looking at a piece and analyzing the time signature, the key signature, the note values, the patterns, all of those things are incredibly helpful. And in the video that you're gonna watch on Wednesday, I'm gonna actually outline that process even a little bit more in detail so that you really get to know it. And so when this challenge is complete, you can take that process into your own practice and be really confident with it. It really is the difference between successful and unsuccessful sight reading. So practice at least one sight reading example tomorrow, set your timer, analyze your example mock play it, and then try to play it through only one time. After you do these sight reading examples, I also want you to take a few notes. I want you to write down 3 things that you did really well in your sight reading, and I want you to write down anything that you noticed that you maybe could have improved on. So maybe you rushed or got off with the metronome, maybe there were some wrong notes, maybe you didn't investigate things thoroughly enough and there was something that surprised you and it caused a mistake. Write down those things and also write down the things that you did really well. Part of this process of getting better at sight reading is also fostering an awareness of how the process works for us specifically in our own personal experiences and being able to adjust our process based off of us as individuals. Happy sight reading. I'm so excited to have you. Please let me know how it goes in the comments below. I would love to hear from you, and I will see you on Wednesday.